In this final video on blending, I want to talk about what we could talk about, maybe like the hidden benefits, the hidden things that can come out of doing blending activities in lessons. And actually, a lot of these things are where a lot of the real learning is going to happen in a phonics lesson. I mean, we can do all we want with our planned lessons, but a lot of the things that will naturally emerge as we play blending games and we let the children experiment with the sounds and the letters are actually far more beneficial for them and get them reading and writing far more quickly than the formalized approaches that we take. So I just want to take a little bit of time to talk about those, because if you're aware of these and can make the most of them in your lessons, you've got the most chance of having the biggest impact on the students in the limited time you have with them each week. So let me show you a little bit about what I mean. So let's imagine that we are playing a basic substitution game. Now I've got it on the board, but it could be down on the table. So we've got our word here. Students are reading this, and we've got met. We can turn this round quite easily, and then we have tem. That's easy enough, we can read that fine. Go back, and then we decide, well, okay, let's change out and get a new letter in. So we get in this one, and we read it just fine. We read wet, and then we try and swap them around. And then we bump into a problem. What does this say? And the child is going to try and read it as to. This doesn't fit. And what we've done here is, through this natural process of this blending game, we've bumped into an exception that doesn't really fit in with the framework of understanding that we're building for the students. We've been swapping all of these things around, they're all interchangeable. All of a sudden we've got an item here which isn't, it doesn't fit where it's supposed to fit. Well, that may seem like, well, that's a bad thing, it's not working, but actually English is full of this. This is why English is such a hard language to learn. It's full of exceptions, it's full of things that don't follow the rules. So part of our role, we've got to get students as ready to accept these as possible. So let's imagine we said, well, it doesn't fit, does it? Well, that's because only likes to go at the beginning of words. No, it's not. The technical reason is to do with the mechanics in our mouth. Is sometimes called a semi-vowel, and that's why we see W letters in so many vowels. But we're not going to say that for the students. So we can establish through this natural occurrence that this doesn't fit. So okay, maybe then we swap it out and we bring in, and our student reads this just fine. We've got het, and then we swap them around. Te. Okay, we can kind of blend it, but it doesn't really fit very well. Again, we've got another sound here which has a preference to appear only in this initial position in words. So by playing these games, what we're able to do is allow these exceptions to occur naturally. And because it's in a game, what it does is it disrupts the flow of the, well, I say game, an activity. Because it's in an activity, it disrupts the flow of the activity. And then this makes this exception far more noticeable than if we're trying to point it out on a paper worksheet. All of a sudden, it's like a spanner has been put into the cogs and the machine isn't working anymore. We've got to stop, we've got to take the spanner out, resolve it, and then we can continue. So these stops that come into these natural blending games are a really, really useful way for getting students familiar with where words and sounds and letters have exceptions. Give you some more examples. Let's say we take out our T and instead we move in this one. And okay, you see where this is going. We've got hang, that works just fine. But if we try to swap it around, it doesn't work. Only goes at the end of words. So you get the idea. You can see how we can point out these difficult spelling conventions, not spelling conventions, these places where we're likely to see sounds and things like this. It also works in the same way with spelling. I mean, we could be playing games where we're making a blend and then we're adding in the letters afterwards. Got a magnet for that. And let's bring back our old confusing friend k. Now, if we are playing a substitution game and we're trying to get the right sounds, we can point out that, heck is perfectly valid, or even like that might be valid, but the correct one is going to be like this. But if we move it into another position, the correct letter is going to be different. So if we swap it around, okay, we can't have H at the beginning, that's been established. Yeah, let's go with that one. That doesn't fit. The natural moving around of the things allows us to spotlight that, in fact, that's not going to fit either. It has to be like this. Now, the rule is that at the beginning of a word, if it's a it will be C with AOU, or it will be K with E, I, and Y. I don't know if that doesn't occur very often, but this is the rule. We're not going to try and teach the students to memorize this, but this kind of natural blending and moving around of words allows us to naturally expose students to these spellings and to cover a lot of these difficult areas. Similarly, at the end of words, means they're going to get a feel for whether it's a C or a K through our games and through the reading, far better than if we try and teach it to them as a rule. Similarly, if we do it at the end of words, let's go back to my H because I like it. Now, it's the actual rule is if it is going to be a short vowel, then we have CK. So it'd be like ak, ik, ok, uk, ek, the example we've got here. But if it is going to be a long vowel or a complex vowel, we normally have, or a digraph vowel, it is normally going to be a K. So if we had hook, we've got OO here, this is going to be the rule. Now, the point I'm trying to get to here is not that I want you to try and teach all of the different rules for k and how it appears in words. The point is that by playing these games, you're allowing these natural trends and patterns to emerge, and the association between them are easier to point out. We take one final example. All right, let's just move these off to one side. If we were to take this one here, we've got gem. Now, is it a G? Is it a J making a G, or is it a G making a G? It's the same as CK. It depends what vowel it follows. So, but we'll talk about that another day. The point is here, we've got a perfectly valid word here, gem. And our students may try and flip this around. Now, J can appear at the end of a word. Better if we have that with an H here. Now, hedge is of course a word, but at the end of a word, it's always followed by a DGE like this. This is how we form a J at the end of a word. Hedge, bridge, things like this. Now, we're not going to be wanting to do this with very low levels, but when we're later on in application level, these same basic blending games can be really, really useful for allowing us to naturally come across patterns. As we said, there are 1,000 different letter combinations. We're not going to ask students to memorize them. The way that they're going to learn these letter combinations and these patterns is through exposure and encountering them in a natural way. They can do that through reading, or if we're looking at it at the word level, through games like this. So yeah, this is one element of blending games which allows us to really teach and get across some of the more difficult and complex elements of learning to read in a way that is far more accessible than we could get through any kind of paper activity. Right, another added benefit which I want to talk about now. I'm going to take these letter cards down. Is these kinds of games, it's very important to encourage experimentation, to let students play around with the words and the phrases that they're making. Now, of course, we may want to stick to targeted CVCs. But an activity that a lot of students really like, which I often do at the end of lessons, actually I'll leave these on, why not, is to let them play around and try and make their own words. We've already talked about that as a basic game for making CVCs. But if you allow it to run, you allow them to experiment, I mean, especially if you've only got 2 or 3 in a class, you can all gather around the board, and swapping letters is one thing, but the natural thing that they're going to want to do is to add and try and make words as long as possible. And that's great. That's a really useful thing for us to do, because what we're doing is we then start to teach syllables. So and all kinds of other things. So let's say you've got kids and they want to keep adding things on. And we have something like this, and then we end up with hest. And they go, okay, add another one. Hest. Now, here we've got a consonant blend worked into our CVC. Naturally, they've chosen it. Then they try and add another one. Hest. All of a sudden, we can't form that. So we can take a step back and think, well, what do we need to have here? Well, we need to have a big sound. We need to have a vowel. So they add in a vowel. And all of a sudden, we're now organically, the students leading the way are teaching multi-syllable words. We've got hesting, hesting, and then we try to add another one, hestink. Oh, hestink, that kind of stink does kind of work there. Hesting, well, that doesn't work. Okay, we need to add in another vowel. And so on. As you can see, they're going to naturally, by allowing them freedom to experiment, this kind of blending game is going to lead you to organically cover multi-syllable words, consonant blends, what is and is not a valid letter collection of letters or sounds to make a word. These are all really important things that they need to learn, and we need to teach them. And this is probably the best way for them to do it, natural experimentation. Similarly, what can often happen is they run out of the basic vowels, and then they look around the room and they find the flashcards for the complex vowels. Now, an instinct may be, oh no, we haven't taught those yet. they're too confusing. But if it's in a game and it's through natural experimentation, there's no harm in allowing students to get used to these things. So let's say we got this long word up here. We've used all of those. Let's move this up. And they decide they want to make another long word. So we begin with, pick them at random. You got shotch, and then imagine we've run out, but they then pick up one of these. Now we don't need to have a big lesson to introduce this sound. They can probably have a guess at approximating what it might be. We don't really need to teach it at all. It's naturally going to slot into this extended blending game where they're just making up long nonsense words. So we've got shotch, burk, car, there we go. Quite like that. Shotch, burk, car, woods. And so, again, through their natural experimentation, you're going to be able to start to allow them to integrate more complex vowels and more challenging elements than they might otherwise be comfortable dealing with, because it's through play and it's through experimentation. Again, you can, so I won't do another one, but many teachers who use this kind of natural experimentation and play as part of their lessons find that integrating complex vowels, and more importantly later on integrating their spelling structures. I mean, we're not going to be in the business of trying to get students to memorize hundreds and hundreds of letter combinations that represent each vowel, but through natural encountering they will learn to deal with these things. This kind of play, this kind of activity is the first step to allow them to do that. And when we do come to encounter these later on, if they've encountered the sounds earlier on through play, it's far less of a challenge for them, and generally they're able to take these complex vowels in their stride and deal with them fairly easily. So I've talked for quite a long time there, but I think we've covered most of the points. The point is that through these play and these activities, we're able to do several things. We're able to encourage noticing of exceptions, of trends and of patterns in a way that we wouldn't do otherwise, especially in relation to sounds and letters which cannot fit in certain positions in terms of spelling rules and spelling conventions. We're also, through experimentation and discovery, able to cover a lot of other areas of phonics and early reading much more effectively than we would be through targeted teaching. So I hope this has all been very useful, and hopefully you can integrate some of these things into some of your lessons.